Hey everybody, before we get to another amazing interview with the great Dr. Ron Paul, this is actually our 500th episode. We actually started Anarchast in 2011, which means we've been doing this for 8 years, 500 episodes. We've had some of the most amazing people on our show. I can't even go through the list because there's 500 of them, but I just wanted to thank everyone out there from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for watching. It hasn't been easy to do all these. I'm not even really a kind of person who enjoys doing these sort of things, but we've ended up with hundreds and hundreds of great new friends and a lot of great content out there to hopefully help free the world, and you're a big part of that, so thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe down below, and thank you once again. Always hit the like button if you can. That helps us out a lot, and of course we're on BitChute and we're on LBRY and others. Not sure how much longer on YouTube, so but we did make it to 500, so thank you guys very much, and let's get to this great interview with Dr. Ron Paul.
From Anarchapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm super thrilled to have back on the great Dr. Ron Paul. If you don't know who he is, I don't know where you've been for the last 30 years. He does the Ron Paul Liberty Report. He's written so many great books, and the Fed, and a longtime freedom activist, you could say. And he's also spoke at the last couple of Anarchapulcos, and he'll be speaking again in 2020. Super thrilled to have you back again, Dr. Paul. And it is very interesting times. I've been watching your Ron Paul Liberty Reports, and you've been talking very similar to me about how crazy things are getting in the financial markets, especially with the repo and the Fed and everything they're doing. What's your current take on where things are at?
Well, I think they're interesting. I think they're very dangerous. I'd find them so fascinating, I'd be entertained. But because I think they're so dangerous for everybody, I can't quite do that. But it is different. I first got involved back in 1971 when a big event occurred. And that was the Austrian economists were absolutely right that Bretton Woods was a total failure, predicted from its inception in 1945. And it did collapse. And of course, gold went from $35 up to $800 in that decade. But I think this event that's just occurring right now, the repo market closing down, an interest rate surprising the Fed, supposedly shot up to 10% in one day, and they restarted, QE. I think that is a big event because it's they've had those kind of problems before, but not under these conditions where they've been inflating like crazy and they have these negative interest rates. What are they going to do? I think it's uncharted waters. I think it's very, very dangerous, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But I do know that it's unstable, and we're going to see some very serious problems. Of course, the financial thing is very important, and people will get poorer because, if you live beyond your means, a country will have to live beneath its means. But what I'm concerned about, and everybody should be, is the violence that may break out. So on the extreme cases, all you have to do is look at Venezuela and other places, and it can get pretty violent. And I think unfortunately, I think our country is capable of doing the same thing, and I'm looking forward to that. But I am also convinced that you're not also all of a sudden going to see wisdom gravitate to Washington and work our way out of this. It's not going to be worked out of it. There's going to be a big one, and then we better pick up the pieces and put something better together than what we put up with the last 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know if they can work their way out of it at this point with the amount of debt and where things are at. It depends what you mean by work your way out of it. If what you mean is just wipe the Federal Reserve away, wipe the IRS, start with like a gold standard again and things like that, then yeah, that is the way to work your way out of it. But
yeah, you could. Excuse me, but you could, but politically it won't happen.
Right.
If you decided you reduce the size and scope of government by 10% per year, it would work, but there'd be a civil war. So it's not going to work. It's not practical, but it could happen. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think the most important thing, and I know you're interested in that, is trying to get people prepared for this, both personally and philosophically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the more that people are aware of what's going on and the more they can prepare for it, the better chances we have of it not getting too horrible when it all happens. As some people have some precious metals, some people have some crypto, things like that. And we were talking about the repo market. I think the last time that this actually happened where the Federal Reserve went in and got involved in the repo market was 2008, right before the last crisis. So we're seeing all the same similar sort of things happening. And you pointed out that the Federal Reserve is already having quite a bit of inflation. And they actually just came out just recently and they said they're going to run hot right now, which was interesting, which just basically means more inflation. And of course, inflation is a big part of the reason that we're at this point with all these sort of problems. And you have so many people starting to recognize there's major issues. I think it was Mervyn King, the ex-Bank of England governor, who said we're right on the precipice of Armageddon in the financial and monetary system. You're seeing a lot of the central bankers saying similar things. It's very interesting times. It must be very interesting for you as someone who's been a big proponent of ending the Fed for a long time, to see that we're getting really close to possibly the end of this central banking sort of system. This is going to be a major thing that's going to happen, and they might not even be able to make it through it.
No, I think there's exciting things happening, and I think central banking is a failure, and people are waking up to it. What about the countries repatriating their gold? They would go through World War II and all these various problems, but boy, they're taking their gold home, and more central banks buying gold, and they are preparing. So no, I think it's all very good, because that's what's happened, by individual countries over the years, is that when you have inflation where you can't control it, they have to resort to go back to using something that is honest, and governments have been able to do that. But this is a bigger problem. See, the dollar reserve standard and what it has done to the world, and all the malinvestment and debt that exists, that is a big deal, because the debt has to be liquidated. We're not going to pay for it. It's just not going to happen. And where the problem is with the liquidation of debt. There's going to be a few winners, but mostly losers. And, a lot of rich people will be rich and they'll be in on gold and they'll survive. But there's a lot of rich people that don't even know anything about the Fed. They just make their money on a day-to-day basis. And even in the 30s, a lot of them lost a lot of money. And there's no perfect protection. That's why it's complex. But I think, and I always resort to this, what we need is not more government. We need more liberty. Let the people work these problems out. They wouldn't be quite so severe, and they wouldn't be worldwide. There'd be individuals having problems and maybe smaller countries. But the way it is now, there's a lot of people involved in this. So, and I find, unfortunately, I find it very interesting and wishfully entertaining, because I don't think we've ever been here before. I think this is big stuff. But I'm also excited because I do believe that the people that endorse the views that we express is that there are answers for this. It's not strange and different. Just curtail the the automatic, the fictitious power that is given to these governments. That's where the problem is. People will always have troubles, but I'll tell you what, if you can keep all the authoritarians out of government, which is impossible, and that's why you have to have government much smaller, we wouldn't be facing that. We'd have problems, but they wouldn't be anything like what the world's facing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I consider the governments and central banks as the main reasons why we're in these problems today. And the fact that some people are looking to governments and central banks for solutions is ridiculous when they were the ones who caused most of these problems. And you talked about, you talked about debt. The U.S. government just came out in November with $200 billion worth of a deficit, which means if they continue that on, it'll be over $2 trillion over the next year. These numbers must be starting to look ridiculous to you. I think back in 1971, when they went off the gold standard a bit there, I think the total U.S. government debt was maybe around 100 or 200 billion. You might remember. I don't remember the exact number, so I know it was in the billions, not in the trillions. And now the government is going into $200 billion worth of more debt every single month. This must start to be looking so insane to you at this point. Yeah.
And even under Reagan, I remember the number with Reagan in 80, it was less than $1 trillion still. So it goes up rather rapidly. But, when the debt gets like this, it's going to be liquidated. And a lot of people say, what does that mean? They're not going to pay their bills and eliminate the debt. No, governments don't do this. The Social Security checks will keep coming, but the liquidation still occurs, and the liquidation occurs with the devaluation of the currency and devalue with the value, the amount of debt you have. I mean, you can keep printing and printing. That's been the frustration of the Federal Reserve. We want to destroy the value of your money, people. We're here to protect the value of money, but we want to purposely destroy it at 2%, and we're so frustrated because we can't do this. The truth is, it's being devalued much further than that. Inflation rate, the prices are going up faster depending on what income bracket you are. I mean, if you're in the military-industrial complex, do you think you worry about what you're paying for bread? And the one other thing that I think is so obvious about what Mises taught in Austrian economics, he says if you destroy a currency, which is what we're doing, we're destroying the dollar, you destroy the middle class. And the more freedom you have, the bigger the middle class. In America, has probably benefited from the largest, most productive middle class ever. But the middle class, it looks like more and more of the middle class is sleeping on the streets. That is scary to me, I'll tell you. That is telling us there's something wrong. And of course, I relate it to the geopolitics as well as why our foreign policy is a big contributor to this. But it's always said that when you get into trouble, whether it's inflation or even now they say there's not enough money. That's what they were saying, in this crisis a couple months ago, and when they didn't have, and nobody would buy the repos. There's not enough money. So they immediately shifted course, and that's why I think it's so dramatic, because they were supposed to be reducing the size of the balance sheet, and all of a sudden it was reversed. I think they put in 300 billion more, and it's going to be a record high in a couple of months, more than they had when they recovered from the last recession. But they're not going to reduce the only way they'll reduce the balance sheet is in real terms, and that is dilute the value of the money. And that's why it's inevitable that prices will go up, and that investments in things to protect against that have to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually remember looking back at the Weimar Republic when they had their hyperinflation, and the currency had started to go up by thousands and thousands of percent per year. It even got to 10,000%, 100,000%. And all along the way, central bankers and economists kept saying there's just not enough money. Yeah, they're always doing that. Is it because these people are incredibly stupid, or like they don't seem to realize how this all works? I think we both know that inflation is created by the central bank printing money, and the fact that they create all these bubbles, they create all these busts, and they create these issues where there's not enough money supposedly, and then they just keep creating money until it hyperinflates. And this has happened over and over and over again. It's not like we don't have any examples in Zimbabwe or Venezuela or so many places, Argentina. Are these people that stupid they just can never figure out what's going on?
Well, there's a lot of ignorance, obviously, but this idea that they need more money, and it was the money that caused the problem. What they need is more value in the money is what they want. But that's in conflict with the politicians who earn their power and their control by giving things away. Whether it's to the military-industrial complex or the welfare state, that's how they get their power, and it works. I mean, if you're a counterfeiter and you have a pretty good counterfeiting machine, you can get away with a murder, and just keep counterfeiting. But our government has a counterfeiting machine. They don't have gold. They use counterfeit money. And it does work, and to a degree. But it eventually ends when they discover, oh, it's actually counterfeit money. I'm getting rid of this stuff. And that's what's happening right now. But they claim that we just need more money. So what they're claiming now is we need a modern monetary theory. That's what the official socialist position is. But I think we already have that too. I mean, how can they get much different than what we're doing now? Print more money, and that's going to solve the problem. No, that's not going to be the problem. People have to concentrate. To me, what I try to tell people, you have to ask one question: what should the role of government be? And if it's to police the world, run the world, have a military-industrial complex, have a welfare state, take care of everybody, believe me, you're going to destroy your liberties, and you're going to destroy the currency, and that's where we are are today. So that I think the founders had a serious intent of doing it, but it wasn't long before it started shifting. The last 100 years has been a disaster. When you think of the income tax and the welfare state, and when we endorsed the warfare state, you remember, Wilson said, our job is to make the world safe for democracy. So I don't think they've achieved their goal, but the only thing they have left is printing more money, and obviously that can't work. But some of them do it out of total ignorance and out of political pressure. You have to realize that if the people understood it, it's not only the education of the people that go to Washington, it's the average person. If they knew this. I had somebody tell me once when I was campaigning, he says, well, Ron, he says, I agree with all what you say about things are going to get bad and we shouldn't be doing this and spending all this money. He says, but my attitude, and he worked for a city councilor, he says, my attitude is we got to get as much as we can get while it's still good. So he philosophically understood what I was saying, but he says, nah, well, we have to take our share. And I guess a lot of people look at it that way till it's all over. But that day is coming.
Yeah, and you've brought up war a few times, the military-industrial complex, and I know there's been some recent information coming out about Afghanistan. I think you covered it. I haven't had time to see your video on that yet, but I saw some numbers like $6 trillion has been spent on the military-industrial complex since 2001, since 9/11, these sort of things. And that's another way that essentially the U.S. is being essentially bankrupted, right? Yeah,
and it continues. We spent more than $1 trillion just in Afghanistan, but it's over $6 trillion. But that's the nominal, that's the dollar figure. But just think of all the other costs, the people who die, our soldiers that die, the collateral damage that they don't even count, the loss of liberty here at home. Just think of our foreign policy, as some people remember, was brought up in the presidential campaign. I said, 9/11 has something to do with our foreign policy, but they don't want to believe that, and they just think that we can do this forever. But I think that it will end, and I think that's what we're witnessing. We're witnessing, the bankruptcy of this country in many, many different ways, and I don't think that that's going to change until the bankruptcy is understood and the debt is liquidated, and hopefully there'll be a recovery of the concept of personal liberty, because it's threatened throughout the world, because war breeds the loss of liberty. Just think when that whole thing is, when 9/11 broke, they had to do something quickly. So within less than a week, Congress passed the Patriot Act. Oh, that'll help a whole lot. Take the liberties away from the American people, and that will help. And they're still promoting even a super Patriot Act now in the Congress. That's where our real problems are. And it's an attitude, and people do believe that they'd be better off, with more government. But it doesn't work. And I think that's the question you have, is why don't they wake up? It doesn't work. Foreign policy doesn't work either, but they keep doing the same. There are always somebody who think they will benefit, and that's the problem. But the people who think they'll benefit by a lot less government are the ones who should have a louder voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been, of course, involved in these sort of things for decades and decades. And you're coming down to Anarchapulco again in February 2020. Really looking forward to seeing you again. How have you seen sort of, we've talked about, how the world needs more freedom, needs more liberty. And in some ways, if you look at it, it looks like things are going really bad. It looks like the statists and all the really hardcore statists and even the socialists are really getting a lot of traction and stuff like that. But on the other side, there's a lot of people starting to wake up. So from your sort of long-term perspective, having talked about freedom now for decades, do you see things going the right way in certain ways? Do you see some hope out there? Or do you see this just going all down the wrong track right now?
Well, if you can put on some blinders for a few minutes and just don't look at anything that's happening in Washington or the Federal Reserve, because we know what's happening there. But there are allies in and bringing about an attitude and changing attitudes, we better have something else. We have already mentioned that we believe it's possible that central banking may end. Now, that's good news. So I would say that the good news is outside of Washington. I think it's in education. That's one of the reasons why I have a homeschooling group, because I do believe it's long-term and it's slow and tedious, but attitudes are important. Ideas have consequences, and they are the most important, because we are dealing, with people who have been in the universities now for decades and decades, and they're still there. But the opportunity now for working outside of the ordinary system because of the internet, which is threatened as well, as we know, but we still can communicate. I have my program and you make use of the internet. So it's available and we can talk to people. Attitudes are changing, but I think that they and more people are agreeing, but they are also are like on a drunken binge. They think that, if I just have another drink, I'm going to feel better. And they do feel better. So people go along with it, spend more money, and do this and that, and they feel better until the next day when interest rates go up another 10 points. So it's going to come to an end, but I think at the grassroots level, a lot of seeds have been sown. I think that when I went to Congress in '76, nobody had the vaguest idea of anything called Austrian economics and free markets or Mises or why you should be talking about the Fed. That took me probably 20 years to get a slight bit of attention, but we ended up getting attention. We still do. I'm amazed at what we read in the routine press. People who are even associated with Wall Street said, "Do you think central banking can last?" So, no, I think attitudes are changing out of necessity, and we have to provide the encouragement for that, because I do believe the libertarian message has the answers for this. And to me, it isn't like we want to get rid of government. I want to get rid of, what I want is self-government. I want every individual to be responsible and self-ownership. Most people accept this idea. Well, whose body is it? And what do you do? What are your religious beliefs be? Liberals and conservatives, when I get the right audience and I'm in the right mood, you can bring people together, because everybody gets to keep their own money, spend the money the way they want. They can practice their own social life as they want. And we don't have any more wars because we just stay at home and we virtually get rid of the military-industrial complex. So it's a wonderful, beautiful message, and it's all based on the fact of the recognition of the value of the individual. Do I think individuals are perfect? No, I think they're very imperfect. But why put them in government? If you're imperfect, you have to suffer the consequences. And college kids responded very favorably to that message. Look, this is what I think you should have. But if you're responsible, you can't. If it doesn't go well, if you have your freedom, you can't go crawling back and say, "Oh, I tried this and I didn't make any money and I need the government to bail me out." That they understood that message too. But self-government is important, and I think libertarians and conservatives make a mistake by saying that we can just modify the regulations. No, you can't. The whole idea is that regulations should be regulations on individuals with only one rule, and that is don't hurt anybody and don't lie, cheat, or steal, or kill. That's not too complicated. And most people say, "Oh, I believe that. I don't think I should go out and kill people." Most people agree with that. But they said, if we turn it over to the government, for some reason there's a moral lapse. If we give this power to the government, it's okay for the government to go into my neighbor's house and steal a car because I don't have a car. But they have a little trouble with it. I wish they'd read Bastiat more often.
Yeah, me too. The great things you just said there, that's a lot of stuff we talk about, of course, at Anarchapulco. So anyone out there is interested in those sort of things, definitely come down February 13th to 16th. Dr. Paul mentioned he also has a homeschooling course, which some people might not be aware of. I've heard from a lot of people it's excellent. So if you're trying to get your kids out of the government schools, which actually I highly recommend, you're looking for giving them some good information, definitely check out Ron Paul's homeschooling course. We'll have a link to that down below. And I thank you very much, Dr. Paul. I know you're very busy and you came on sort of last minute. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you wanted to mention about your things or anything that you want to let people know?
Well, very, very briefly, we had an exciting item today because our viewers on on YouTube, well over 200,000. So we considered that because we started off with a couple hundred. So we're very pleased with the number of people who have joined our channel at YouTube.
That's great. We'll have the links to that all down below, and I'll see you down here in Acapulco in February. Once again, thank you very much to Dr. Paul. And that's it for the that's it for Anarchast. Your hope. I have a couple of channels. That's it for Anarchast. Your hope for anarchy on the internet. Peace.
Okay.
Love,
very good.
and anarchy.
But I wrote a song about freedom fighters and what the lengths they will go to. I was in Mexico talking to these guys at the Anarchapulco conference, and I was bitching and moaning that it took me like 12 hours to get down there because I went through Mexico City. They said it took us 4 days. I'm like, what do you mean it took 4 days to get here? And they said, well, we took a train. I'm like, you can't take a train. They were from Chicago. You can't take a train from Chicago to Acapulco, Mexico. And they said, oh, yeah, you can. I'm like, no, you cannot. They do it hobo style. They hopped trains to get to Anarchapulco. So I wrote a song about them. It's called Anarchapulco, Here We Come. It's got train sounds. So we'll see if this works. Freedom in our mouth, shedding silly rules from the government tools. From every land we come, it don't matter where you're from, by land or sea or air, fuck the borders, we don't care. We're fighting for our lives, for our freedom in the sun. Everybody singing Acapulco, here we come. Acapulco, here we come, and Acapulco, here we come. Gonna rise against the man, gonna tear down what we can. It's the way our life should be, it's the way we should be free. In Acapulco, here we come, and Acapulco, here we come. You wanna change the world, hop on the train and run. Everybody singing Acapulco, here we come. Woo woo. Longer if you're free, cause the rules are thrown away. Day is night and night is day, and the only thing they ask, give everyone a pass. Be the way you'll be when your life is truly free. Going crazy all day, all night until you're done. Everybody singing Acapulco, here we come. Acapulco, here we come, and Acapulco, here we come. Gonna rise against the man, gonna tear down what we can. It's the way our life should be, it's the way it should be free. In Acapulco, here we come, and Acapulco, here we come. You wanna change the world, hop on a train and run. Everybody singing Acapulco, here we come. That's fun.